Hello and welcome to FP Live. I'm Ravi Agrawal, Foreign Policy's Editor-in-Chief. In a few weeks, the Biden administration will hand over the reins of power to President-elect Trump. U.S. foreign policy could change dramatically, and one of the arms of government, U.S. aid, will play a key part in that change. U.S. aid administers more than $60 billion of American taxpayer money globally and plays a key role in achieving the White House's global objectives. In a moment, we will chat with the person who runs that organization. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We take some subscriber questions, and I always channel all of them in my own line of inquiry. If you want to put a question to our guests as well, join us. You can use the code FPLive for a substantial discount. We are also a podcast. Follow us wherever you get your audio. So my guest today runs one of the world's biggest aid agencies. Samantha Power is the administrator of U.S. aid and is the first person with that job to also have a seat on the National Security Council. Power is a former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, a former journalist, and also the author of the Pulitzer Prize-winning book, A Problem from Hell, among many other books. Samantha Power, welcome back to FP Live.
Great to be here.
So we're going to check in on a number of hotspots today, but let me start with this. In A Problem for Hell, the book I just mentioned, which made a strong moral case for using American power to prevent human rights crimes around the world, you wrote, and I quote, "When innocent life is being taken on such a scale and the United States has the power to stop the killing at a reasonable risk, it has the duty to act." You wrote that in 2002, I believe, and you're in a position of power now. So I have to ask, why haven't you done more to stop the ongoing atrocities in Gaza, much of which have been committed with weapons funded by U.S. taxpayers?
Thank you. Well, having the privilege of being at USAID, an agency that is the lead government actually trying to reach Palestinians with assistance, I actually feel really fortunate given the scale of suffering that I'm in a position to be negotiating things that I know seem small, maybe next to the scale of suffering going on, but that matter for people who are reached with a food distribution or something as, again, what seems as paltry as a tent, but one that, at this point, we only have 22% of shelter commodities actually having reached civilians, even as the temperature drops. So that's my focus, Ravi. I, again, get to work with our responders. I get to work with the agencies who are in Gaza, putting their lives on the line. As you know, more aid workers have been killed in Gaza than any other place in the world. And I take my responsibility to advocate both within the administration for the policies that I think will best advance the cause of trying to see less civilian pain against the backdrop of this horrific war, but also the operational responsibilities I have to actually negotiate changes that can make a difference. It's really bad. I mean, it is, I think, in terms of the concentration of suffering, the attacks on civilians, while the IDF is pursuing Hamas, which is still, again, waging attacks against Israeli civilians, and has made no secret still of its desire to destroy Israel. Civilians are caught up in the conflict. Tens of thousands of kids have lost one or more parent. So you're right. It's not because I wrote a book. It's because it's also my job as USAID administrator, as we are, the agency that has resources and political leverage to push for changes that will see less of that suffering. And my only hope now, Robbie, honestly, is that we are hopefully, closing in on a ceasefire now that Hamas can't, count on the wider war that it had hoped for. But that is the only way we're going to see humanitarian assistance reaching people at scale, and the civilian casualties that are coming about so often in IDF strikes, including even in the safe zone.
So, and I want to be clear, the reason why I even bring up your book is because, in addition to your role, you're a superstar, you're a human rights superstar, and it's part of your profile. It's part of what brings you attention and gives you, in a sense, more power than previous administrators in your role. And so not for a second will I question your intent on this particular issue. I question outcomes. And let me ask you this.
You should question outcomes. I mean, I think you can't look at what has been achieved. You can't look at the number of trucks that are reaching people, for example, now in North Gaza, where we've barely been able to see a trickle of food reaching people since October. And while we see, a little bit of an uptick elsewhere in the country, nowhere near commensurate with
Yeah.
basic conditions. But what I'm saying is, again, I'd sooner be in this role, pushing within the U.S. government, pushing the IDF and Israeli political authorities, than I would be writing another book about the subject.
Let me jump to one of the other sort of arenas you mentioned, Sudan, and the civil war there, as you said, has killed many tens of thousands of people. There's a famine underway. A bipartisan group of senators this week has called on the Biden administration to do more. I mean, I guess, first of all, would you call what's happening there a genocide? And second, just from USAID's perspective, what more can be done now to send in the aid that people there need?
Um, I mean, anything that we can think to do, just as on Gaza, we are doing with, again, the limited effects that we see on the ground, but we have, reached, many millions of people, even if not with enough commodities that they need. In terms of, what the atrocities underway should be called, again, that lives at the State Department. There's a complicated analysis underway there, but we certainly see many of the kinds I mentioned. One of the features of the genocide back in 20 years ago was that it involved mass sexual violence to try to destroy the African tribes in Darfur specifically. Those same militia are at large today, and again, the reports are just as chilling and harrowing as they were back then, with the complicating factor that you also have the Sudanese armed forces, using air power in a manner that often does not discriminate between, civilians and non-civilians. I should say they were active in the genocide back there as well, but now they're fighting each other with only civilians caught in the crossfire. I think, as members of Congress have made clear, as President Biden has made clear publicly and privately, any country that has leverage over the players on the ground who, are doing a heck of a better job getting access to arms than they are to getting access, providing access for the populations in their territory to food and water and medicine. Those spigots have to dry up for the calculus to change, by the parties on the ground. And Tom Perriello, our envoy, who I'm sure you've talked to, has been really working with the UN and the African Union and members of the Arab League to try to bring people together around a shared set of objectives. But right now, both belligerents, both parties think that they can win. And they appear, willing to allow and to inflict all kinds of harm on civilians in pursuit of that maximalist goal. Whereas we know, in the end, just as every war in Sudan has ended at the negotiating table, that is what's going to happen. It's just a question of, how much harm in the meantime.